All right, so we have air naval phase up next. Go ahead and move my phase track marker. So if you're following along, we're here. Air superiority step. So I'm going to count the number of air bases and airfields with strike markers remaining on them which are not under repair. So obviously this is only going to affect the NATO player. Nothing's been striking the Russian or the non-allied player. If you remember from earlier, we put some serious hits on the NATO holding box. Let me move back here. So you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 strike markers. Destroyed markers are not strike markers. So there are 4 strike markers in the NATO holding box. So the owning player, so the allied player, has to move half that number, rounded down to a minimum of 1 of units into the flown box from air units based in the appropriate theater. So I've got to move, as the allied player, I've got to move 4 of the NATO units, not the Polish units, because this is the NATO holding box, not Poland. Half of those is 2, so I'm going to take these 2 damaged units. That's perfectly fine. I'm going to move them into the flown box. They won't be available this turn. I'm not going to move the camera, but if you remember earlier from the earlier SOF raids, we destroyed an air base or an airfield, so that's not going to count in Poland. But we did put a strike 2 marker on an air base in Poland. That's 1. So you round down, but there's a minimum of 1. So the Poles have to move 1 unit down. So they're also going to move their damaged Su-22 down in the flown box. And then we go to the next step. Next step here, which is count the number of air bases, airfields either captured or destroyed in the previous turn, or this turn's first SOF. That includes the cruise missile strikes. So if you remember, there's the markers that we're removing up here. We have 1 Polish air base that was destroyed. Actually, it was an airfield, but this covers both air bases and airfields. And we have 3 NATO. So again, it's a round down a minimum of 1 for that particular basing. So the Poles have to move 1. So they're going to take their other Su-22 and move it down. And we'll take this marker off here, put it off to the side, and then NATO, there were 3, so divide that in half, 1.5. Round down is 1. So NATO is also going to move their tornado down. And that's pretty much going to be it for those. So we reset those markers to 0, and then we place air units in the air superiority box. So there's a set order to do that based on AWACS. I'm not going to worry about that since I'm flying solo here. Basically, I think NATO is going to go ahead and challenge for air superiority. So they're going to move all these guys, all these Typhoons up, the Rafales, these MiG-29s, and these F-16s. They're going to go for broke, try to maintain some semblance of air equivalence, and they're going to go ahead and fly this F-35 off the carrier. If you read the note in there, only long-range units can fly missions when the carrier's in the North Sea, which is it's there. So fortunately, that F-35 is long-range, so he can fly. If you look at these other carrier units, they're all medium range, so they're not going anywhere anytime soon. So we'll just leave them there, and then we'll take these Russian planes. These guys pretty much are only good at intercept stuff anyway. So we'll throw every last one of them up here. And we'll throw the 2 Belarus MiGs. I think I'm going to skip flying the Su-30 and Su-35s. We'll save those for strikes and or close air support later, since it looks like we have some kind of a small majority here. And then we go to setting combats. Since the Allies have an AWACS advantage of 1, they get to set the first air superiority combat. If they had a 2, they would set the first 2, and then the non-allied would set 1. If it was a 3, whoever had a AWACS advantage of 3 would set 3 combats, and then the other player would set 1. So in this case, so I don't get this F-35 masked by something I don't want to take on, I'm going to go ahead and take it up against this Russian Su-27. I'll turn it this way just so we know he's not advantaged. And then it's the Russian player's turn to assign a combat. He doesn't. He did this -2 Raphael. That's a pretty good plane. So he's going to go ahead and put one of his MiG-31s up against that, see if he can't take it out in long-range combat before stuff happens. So the Allied player is going to take his -2, and he's going to take on this Su-27. And the non-Allied player, who does he want to get next? So he'll take another MiG-31 up against this -1 Typhoon. And the Allied player is running out of -1s, so he'll take this Polish F-16. Oh, and I think he'll take on this MiG-29. And then we got the Russian player again. He's just gonna he'll pick this other Raphael. And now we're starting to get the slim pickings into the minuses here. He doesn't really want to take that, so he's gonna see if he can't do that. Another MiG-31. See if we can get one of these F-16s out of here. They did, because they're useful strike and close support. And then we have the Allies picking an engagement. I'll try this. And then we got one last MiG-31. I'll deal after that guy. I'm gonna run out of room here. I didn't leave enough space. Let's move these guys down a little bit. And he'll take this guy. And the Russian, or the Allied, non-Allied player gets one last one. He's going to go ahead and do that. So the non-Allied player ends up with 3 extra. He can just leave them there, and they'll still count for air superiority. They don't have to engage anything. Or he can go ahead and throw them into the fight. Not really sure if I want to try to get to that F-35, because I could put 2 planes. So I could double up. I could get 2 planes on this F-35, but I can't shoot at him until I get to dogfight, so I'd have to hope I survive long enough. Let's go ahead and try that. So it'd be good to knock that airframe out. And then we're going to go ahead and see if we can get this Raphael out of here as well. We might as well put this guy in this Typhoon, and we'll see what happens. So let me grab my tables here. So normally how this works is you go, you do all long-range combat, then you do all standoff combat, then you do all dogfight combat. I found it's actually easier if you just take one set of engagements and just run them all the way through to the end. So in other words, take these 3 planes, do the long-range, do the standoff, do the dogfight. Go to these, go to these, go to these. Since there's no re-engagement in air superiority, that's fine. It works just as well. If you get your chart out. Whoa. Let's see, we've got our advanced air combat here. So I think that's what I'm going to do. So there is no, so we go to long range combat for those guys. F-35 is the only one with long range combat. He's going to shoot at the -1 Su-27. So the differential there is 4 minus 5, so he's going to be on the -1 column. And there's no other die roll modifiers for long range. I'm going to roll a die. It's a 5 on the -1 column is nothing. So the Russian planes don't get to shoot. They can't fire at stealth planes in long range or standoff fire. So we go to standoff combat. Again, the F-35 is going to fire on the -1. This time it's a 0. So if we cross-reference 0 with the -1 column, we can see that we have damaged. So we'll flip this guy and aborted him. So we'll send him down here. The Russian cannot fire back in standoff again because it's stealth, but now we're in a dogfight. And in dogfight, so long range and standoff was simultaneous. In dogfight, the higher combat value goes first. So the Su-27 is going to fire before the F-35, and the Su-27 will be on the +1 column, but no die roll modifiers. The F-35 will be on the -1 column, but he'll earn a -2 for that pilot skill. I'm just going to roll 2 dice. You can't really see him, but I'll have a two different colors, so I'll just designate which one is which. So the Russian player rolls a 2 on the +1 column, and that takes effect before anything else. So he's damaged and aborted that F-35, so he goes back to the carrier. And then the F-35 does not get to fire, because remember, dogfight, it's air-to-air combat value in order, and you do the results. So he doesn't even take dogfight. But the F-35 stood off against 2 and, you know, sent 1 home, so that's not too bad. So we'll go to that next combat. So here you notice the MiG-31s. Let me pull that counter up here. They also have a standoff or long-range rating, so he's going to go ahead and get the first shot in on that Rafale. Although he's a 3 against a 4, so he'll be on the -1. With a 7 is not going to do anything. So now we go to standoff combat, and again it's simultaneous. I'm going to roll the Russian dice first. So the one Su-27 will be a +1, and the MiG-31 will still be on the -1 column. And there are no real modifiers that are going to apply to that. So we'll just roll. Let's see, 4 on the +1 is going to be an abort, and a 3 on the -1 would be an advantage, so it's not going to matter. So that Rafale is going to abort no matter what, but he's going to try and take out that MiG-31 since he's got the +1 on him. So he'll roll, and he rolls a 3 on the +1, which is also an abort. So both of these guys end up aborting, but that does leave that Su-27. So I'm not gonna talk through every single one of these. I think you get the gist of it. I'm just gonna start rolling. So these are gonna be standoff combats. 1 at +1, 1 at even. So 7 at +1 is gonna be nothing, and 8 even is gonna be nothing. So the Typhoon gets his. Yeah, he'd shoot at the 4, I think. So he'd be a 0 even. There's gonna be a damage and an abort. So he's gonna send that guy home. And then we're going to go to dogfight combat. Distinct advantage for the Typhoon. Rolls poorly with a 5, which damages his opponent. No, he's on the -1. So he gets nothing. But the Russian rolls a 0 on the +1. And that is an X result. So the Typhoon is destroyed. Put him over here. It's 2 VPs this turn for the non-allied player. And that guy survives. So now we have a long-range combat. 7 at -1 is going to be a miss. We go to standoff. Let's see, a 3 at -1 is going to be advantaged. And a 4 at +1 is going to be an abort, I think. Yep, so the MiG-31 thought he had an advantage, and then he aborted. So he goes away. One NATO plane finally makes it in. So these guys are dead even and standoff. A 7 and a 5. Even. So the non-allied player gets advantage, which means in dogfight combat he's going to fire first, which in this case it does matter because they were even. They would have fired simultaneously. Here the MiG-29 is going to get his shot off before the F-16. He rolls a 5, but he's a -1, so it becomes a 4, same result. So the F-16 is going to take damage before he gets to fire back, but now you notice he's a 2. He rolls a 1 on the -2, which is, but he's a 0. Okay, so mine on the -2. Oh, he damages his opponent in return, and both planes stay here. Alright, then we go to long-range combat. A 6 on the -1 is going to be nothing, so we go to standoff. The Russians get a 0 on the -1, which is going to be a damage and abort, and the Allies get a 4 on the +1, which is an abort. So we're going to flip the Rafale and abort him, but this guy's going to abort as well, which is a pretty good result as far as NATO is concerned. Keep that count down. So next we have 2 standoff shots. So Belarus is non-NATO, non-Japan, non-Russian, non-PRC, so they get a +1 to their standoff die roll modifier. So his 7 even is going to be nothing on a 5 even. The Typhoon's going to end up advantaged on the MiG. So they go to dogfight with the Typhoon shooting first with an abysmal roll of 8, and the MiG-29 is a 7, so neither one of them do anything except maneuver around each other. So next shot, we've got some long-range fire, and 8's not going to do it, so we go to standoff. A 6 on the -1 for the Russians, not going to do anything, but a 2 on the +1 is going to be a damage and an abort, so he'll send those guys running home. This is actually not turning out too bad for NATO. We have a standoff. Again, the Belarusians are +1 on their roll, which is a 5 even, is going to be an advantage, but the Allies got a 2 on the even, which is an abort. So I'll abort over there. We have some more standoff here. Ooh, a 0 on the -1. It's going to be a damage and an abort. So he sends this Polish F-16 packing. And we're going to have standoff. 9 for the non-allied, a 2 for the allied player. 2 even is going to be an abort, so he's going to send this MiG-29 to the abort box. And he ends up over here. This is actually not bad. And then finally we have some more standoff. 5 for the allied is going to be an advantage, but there's a 1 for the non-allied. Even is damaged and aborted, so this German Typhoon goes home damaged and aborted. Then we count it up. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A little bit over 1 to 1. So if we come down here and we take a look, less than 1.5 to 1, contested. I'll just flip this here because the Russians had, or the non-allied player had more planes left, but it doesn't really matter. And more importantly, this AWACS advantage doesn't shift. Obviously, the non-allied player wants to change that in the future if possible. I think we'll stop there. We'll do the naval portion in the next video. Thanks.